Hi everyone, it's Rena. So this video is if you have your sun in Pisces and your moon in Sagittarius. And I actually knew someone who had this combination. And um, I remember reading one time that because Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, it can take on the characteristics of the other signs. And so some Pisces people may resemble a Virgo person, their opposite sign, a lot more than the typical Pisces, or they might be like a Leo where they're very dramatic and gregarious. And then you have the moon sign, which really can affect people and impact the personality for sure, but especially a sign like Pisces, because Pisces is a mutable water sign, and that means that it has the ability to adapt, to be influenced by things around it. And so the emotions can be influenced by other people's emotions. That's why Pisces is the ultimate empath. So I'm talking about Pisces as a sign. The moon sign in particular is our emotional nature. And, if you have the moon in water, you're going to be, even more outwardly emotional. Although a sign like Scorpio might be very secretive about letting people know where they stand, or if they have been hurt by them, they might keep that to themselves. There's that saying, not getting mad, getting even. But in general, the moon will be expressed either in a very outward kind of a way with the fire signs like Sag, that could be very dramatic, like fire, like a firestorm or something like that. So this combination is a double mutable one. And fire signs have a dramatic kind of self-expression, a creative self-expression that is very much about their own essence. And then you have the water element as the sun, represented by Pisces, and that is very receptive. It's a feminine. It's the feminine versus the masculine. These two signs do square off, so there is friction. You may not have an actual square between your sun and moon. It depends on what degrees they're in. But they do have differences and they do clash. And if you are a Pisces and you do have a Sagittarian friend or a Gemini friend, you may understand how this comes about, because you irritate each other. But sometimes there's a physical attraction at the same time, even within that irritation. What do these two signs have in common? Well, they're both connected to spirituality. Jupiter is the ancient ruler of Pisces, and Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius, so that Jupiter connection is there. And so the person is going to very likely come from a spiritual perspective in life, even if they don't set foot in a church. They just maybe have a lot of, they might have intuitive gifts, they may be philosophical, but something about them, prophetic, clairvoyance abilities in some way. Maybe they have prophetic dreams, but they probably are going to be connected to spirituality in some way. And but that's where I said that the sign of Pisces can take on other signs, because there are always going to be outliers. This is one of the reasons why I always get a little bit amused when people write to me and say, you can't say that about all da da da, whatever the sign is, because everybody's an individual and all that stuff. Okay, well, why are you into astrology if you think that everybody's an individual? This is a classification system. And these are archetypes. They're not meant to be down to the letter of every characteristic that somebody has. And when you look at the whole picture, you're also taking into account the person's moon, besides the sun and the moon. They've got Mercury and they've got Venus and Mars and the ascendant, and where are these personal planets in the different houses? That's going to affect it as well. What kind of aspects do these planets make to other planets? And so it's just kind of funny how people react to that. But there probably will be some Pisces people who reject their spiritual gifts. I suspect there are two reasons for it. Number one, they were discouraged from their family of origin. Like that's what happened to that famous psychic from the 1900s, Edgar Cayce, because he grew up in the Bible Belt. And he was talking about his dead grandfather when he was 4 years old. He had never met the man. The man had died before he was born, but he was having conversations with him, or somebody asked him, who are you talking to? He said, Grandpa, you weren't alive when Grandpa was there. So it didn't go over very well. People were frightened by his abilities. And so luckily, he did not completely reject them, but other people do. So that could be one reason, that other people's displeasure, kind of discourages you. The other reason can be if the person is scared of what happens. Maybe there is some kind of paranormal event that is not very pleasant. I think sometimes the New Age community makes everything out to be so, inspirational, wonderful, but I'm sure there are a lot of scary things that happen. I always say, like, I remember when the Amityville Horror book came out, and I read that book, and I remember sitting in my kitchen, like late at night, and I was so scared. And I was like 14 years old. I wasn't that young, but it was like all these paranormal experiences. And I think it was based on a real story, so that made it even scarier. But it's so cool. It was cool at the same time. But it's like some of these things aren't much fun, these paranormal things. And if you have experienced them, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of Pisces people attract that, then it might be very frightening, especially if if you were on the younger side and you didn't understand what was going on. I could see how that would be very frightening, and you would just reject it out of hand and just concentrate, maybe overemphasize the rational, which is that opposite sign, Virgo, the analytical side. And so, yeah, there might be some people like that, but in general, you're going to be very, very mystical and things like that. So sometimes with Pisces, and this is for the sun position, we have to understand what the sun represents. The sun represents the masculine, and the masculine represents that side of life where you came to accomplish things. Now, we're talking about the divine masculine, so we're not talking about toxic competition and maybe excessive ambition. We're talking about embodying your talents, bringing them into some sort of tangible reality so that you can benefit mankind humankind. Okay. And Pisces, because Pisces is ruled by Neptune, there can be in some, and you also check your sun sign to see if it is in hard angle. Of course, it is with the moon for some of you, but in other, like a square to Saturn or an opposition to Saturn, for instance, things like that. Because that can exacerbate this, or if your sun is squaring off to Neptune, to your natal Neptune, or opposing it. So that idea of the person who has a difficulty trying to find out who they are. Sometimes, that can occur because there was an overbearing parent, and sometimes that overbearing parent is represented by Pluto. So a sun square Pluto, sun square Saturn, that can be the authoritarian type of individual. And the person feels like they don't have a sense of themselves, or they're not allowed to be themselves. And this can feel very painful, obviously, because we all want to feel that we have the right to pursue what we want. And we don't have to, feel guilty for wanting to just do our own thing. And so, anyway, the point is that there could be this drifting, aimless quality to the Pisces person. And the moon in Sagittarius isn't going to necessarily help out here because it is likewise a mutable sign. So mutable signs are very flexible, so they can kind of adapt to whatever situation they're in. And then on top of that, you have this kind of philosophical or spiritual attitude. So people who are like that tend not to be ambitious in a worldly sense. As a matter of fact, this combination might inspire some people to just chuck it all and, move to India and live in an ashram. They might check out of the rat race because they feel like it's, never going to be satisfying for them. The sign of Pisces in the negative sense can be escapism, but in the positive sense, it can be transcendence. It can be this merging with God. And that's why Neptune is also connected to drugs, because when people take drugs or even something like alcohol, which has a numbing quality, but also in larger amounts can be so intoxicating that the person forgets what they're doing, or, they lose memory. But they have that, they're transcending that mundane consciousness and losing themselves. There's that idea of losing oneself when you're in that spiritual state, because the self is sometimes seen as the enemy because it's connected to the ego or what have you. So these concepts can be sometimes distorted into, if I have any kind of ambition or like goal, then I am, being worldly. If I have any kind of material desire, I'm materialistic, making it out to be something like that. As I have gotten older, I have become highly suspicious of any spiritual practice that encourages people to meditate for hours a day. Because I think to myself, well, what in God's name are we doing here then? If we're just here to sit here and meditate, that doesn't make any sense to me. Neither does it make sense to me when they say, oh, just meditate for 10 minutes. I think that, 10 minutes isn't enough to recalibrate unless you are doing those 10 minutes throughout the day. That might be like perfect, just to like reset yourself. But anyway, I just want to make it clear that in terms of meditating for long periods of time. There are things like the Vipassana retreat, which is 10 days, and they meditate. They probably meditate like 8 hours a day or 7 hours or something like that. I understand that there may be special circumstances where people are doing like marathon sessions. And if somebody is meditating for long hours a day, maybe they have some kind of training because they're going to become a shaman or a meditation teacher or something like that. There might be very important reasons to do that. I'm speaking only of my own sense of things in general. And it also based on a book that I read about a woman. I'm not going to say the the system that she was in because I don't want to bash anything, but it was like she meditated for I think hours a day, and I got the feeling, and I think her daughter who wrote the book got the feeling that it was a form of escapism, that it wasn't really anything to do with communing with God as much as it was rejecting the current circumstances. And there were, there like if you read the books of some of these great yogis, I'm trying to think like Ramakrishna. I think people like him, they stayed in the state of meditation for their waking hour. I mean, they were always in what they call that state of samadhi, where they are in this blissful higher state. And these are, special circumstances. But if we are householders, if we are living a normal life, then to me, these kinds of practices might be a bit excessive. So, but there's a possibility that some of you don't want to be householders, that you do want, maybe you feel a strong yearning to be part of some kind of spiritual community, or being a monk or a yogini, something like that. So that can create conflict if there are other things that you want to accomplish, or if that would take you away from your family and friends, and they would think that you joined a cult, and they would, feel like you've been mind controlled. That can create conflict in your life. So I don't know if any of you have had those yearnings or have experienced people in your life freaking out because you have, that you've really immersed yourself in something. But I do feel like, let's talk about the moon in Sagittarius. Now, the moon, like I said, is the emotional nature. Sagittarius is a fire sign. It's very vivacious, friendly. There can be a party animal aspect to the moon in Sag in particular, because the person, the moon can indicate, what makes you feel safe. Sag is half animal and half man, meaning that's what the centaur, I don't know how to say it, centaur, what that centaur represents is the animal part and then the man part. The man part is very studious. Somebody like Jim Morrison, the lead singer of the Doors, is a perfect example of that, both sides of that, the duality of that Sag can be. Because he had a genius IQ, he was very intellectual, and then he was like this completely, out of control person in his private life when it came to, partying and things like that. And so this can actually be a saving grace in a certain sense, because Pisces people tend to go through a lot, maybe because it's the last sign, that there's this karmic resolution for one cycle of going through all the 12 zodiac signs. And so such a person may be dealing with more than their fair share of trauma, or simply that the trauma that they experienced hit them harder because of their sensitive nature. And then you have this moon sign representing the emotions, but it's in Sagittarius and a fire sign, and it can make the person a lot more positive, and a lot more have a can-do spirit, because sometimes with Pisces there can be the victim mentality, but I'm not saying it like kind of disparagingly. I'm saying because the person was a victim, they may fear that this is just their fate in life, and they can have a learned helplessness. And so it's very helpful, even though this can be a tense angle, the Sag moon can bolster or be buoyant emotionally and keep that person from getting too sad or too, I don't know, anxious and things like that. Sag is very positive, so positive thinking can be really in your repertoire. Actually, this combination might make a great life coach, because you may have been through some things that you could help others heal from. Kind of like Chiron, the wounded healer, that has a Piscean quality, you know. So in terms of professions, I could definitely see somebody who is a life coach, a psychic, you know, straight up psychic, or if you like astrology or the tarot, that kind of thing. And the messages that you give others may be of an uplifting nature. And then there's also the love of creative pursuits that might be very strong in this combination. The moon in Sagittarius can be somebody who just loves to be surrounded by people. I really think of Pisces sometimes in and of itself as a gregarious sign. So it's just enhanced by having the moon in Sagittarius. And you may just enjoy having a good time. You might be one of those people who just really enjoys doing things that are pleasurable to you, that bring you around other people. If you are, like, let's say you're a musician, you might like hanging out in a local club that, you know, has open mic and everybody takes turns playing their songs, and then they hang out together. That might be like your perfect scenario. In terms of love, this combination can be romantic, but there can also be this, with the moon and Sag, it's almost like an adventurous, somebody who enjoys doing things that are exciting, not necessarily somebody who is wanting a quiet life or anything like that. So you really are going to be different than some other Pisces. You probably don't want those heavy emotions, so you don't necessarily want those in relationships either. And depending on some of your inner planets, like Venus and Mars, for instance, that can determine the type of person. If you have Venus and or Mars like in Aquarius, Pisces, or possibly Sag, you're going to be more like a the Sagittarius influence. I'm sorry, I said Sag, I meant Aries. That's on the other side of you, because Aries is a fire sign like Sagittarius. So an example would be your sun is in Pisces, Your moon is in Sagittarius and you have Venus in Aries. Well, that's going to tip the balance more towards the fire element. And then, of course, you have to look at Mars too. What if Mars is in Aquarius? That's still a masculine element. And that will make you more independent. That will make you more wanting some kind of relationship that doesn't tie you down. Because sometimes the water signs, the feminine signs, they can be very domestic and they can want to, like, they could be very family oriented and they just want to be homebodies and, do things from that perspective. Whereas the influence from the fire and the air, because it's masculine energy, tends to like to expand their base and kind of always be exploring the outside world. This is one of the reasons why some people are not compatible in terms of this quality. They might be attracted to one another and they might have things in common, but the person who's a homebody who doesn't want to go out, that's going to kind of clash with the person who wants to explore the latest restaurant, the latest, maybe they want to travel a lot, or at least locally, they want to go to new places. They want to hang out in the city. They want to do all these things. So I do think that you may be very romantic, but you're also, because you are a Pisces, you have that tenderness and that all the water signs possess, that is hard to really articulate, but is there, that caring at a deep level. The only thing that kind of obscures it is because the moon being in Sag and dealing with the emotions, Sag is, not necessarily like that. As a matter of fact, all the fire signs can be accused of being insensitive because that fire, that masculine element, tends to be very active and like independent. And it's like, if somebody's hurt, they might say, get over it, that kind of thing. And that might really bother somebody who's more sensitive, who's looking for sympathy, validation. What you do want to be careful of is that you don't, choose the wrong partner and then live to regret it, because Pisces people may not realize, having the moon in Sagittarius, how important it is for their emotional freedom. So it is important to pick somebody who isn't going to just like smother you, even though you do have an emotional nature. And I think that this combination can commit if they find that person who really does it for them. So being selective enough is very important. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.